Okay, hello everyone and welcome to this space of interview. I would like to share that today we have a very special guest with us. Today is Carlos Umana. Carlos is a Nobel Peace Prize and he's here with us in order to let you some information about his experience, so feel free to ask whatever you are interested on. So who would like to make the first question?
Okay, so hi, I was just wondering, what do you think are some initiatives that can be considered as effective when talking about promoting peace, whether it's throughout medical and scientific collaboration across borders?
That's a really good question, especially considering my background and how we got here with you, because I'm a medical doctor. I'm currently co-president of IPPNW, short name. It's International Physicians for the Prevention of Nuclear War. Now, IPPNW, well, it's just to put you in a little bit of a context. It's an organization that was created in 1980 by American and then by United States and then Soviet physicians. And what they wanted to do was basically communicate the humanitarian impact of nuclear weapons, right? Because nuclear weapons were discussed like a chess piece, like a strategic asset. Yes. And what they wanted to do was to present the evidence of what they actually cost to people. So they created a movement that spread around the globe and actually had a significant impact, political impact, on nuclear weapons states leaders. On Reagan and Gorbachev. And for that, they received the 1985 Nobel Peace Prize for spreading authoritative information and for raising awareness. Now, in 2006, this federation also created another organization. It's called the International Campaign to Abolish Nuclear Weapons. I'm also on the board of that one. And this is ICAN, a lot easier. ICAN. It's also like ICAN. Yeah. That's not a coincidence. It's basically an empowerment. ICAN is a coalition of now 653 organizations in 110 countries. And I was in that one at the time. We were awarded the Nobel Peace Prize in 2017 for, I quote, for our efforts on raising awareness on the humanitarian impact of nuclear weapons, and also for our groundbreaking efforts in achieving a treaty-based prohibition of these weapons. This is the Treaty on the Prohibition of Nuclear Weapons, the TPNW, that was adopted in July of 2017. So, going back to your question, this treaty is actually what we call humanitarian disarmament and evidence-based policymaking. This means evidence-based policymaking. Well, not talking to a colleague here that's studying medicine.
No, medicine, hospital management.
Oh, hospital management.
Yes.
Okay. Well, evidence-based policymaking is a concept that comes from medicine, evidence-based medicine, right? Mm-hmm. And it's basically making decisions coming from evidence. So when we talk about humanitarian disarmament, what we're doing is placing science at the service of the people, so that the people can be at the center of the nuclear debate. So science has to be central to this debate, certainly.
Thank you for your response.
So it's quite interesting because he's doctor, but after 1 year of practicing, he decided to move to liberal art studies, and after that, he decided to move to this world of the activist. So as you can see, life is not like one way side, so you have multiple choices and you can decide in any moment where is your opportunity. So I think this is a great lesson that we can take advantage. Yes. Okay, next question.
So thank you for being here with us. During your time answering the first question, you mentioned human rights, you mentioned peace, you mentioned medicine as well. I was just wondering how the overall of the scientific community would contribute more effectively for promoting world peace efforts.
Okay, well, that's a really good question as well. And science has to be central to political decisions. Like we traditionally, we don't view science within the UN. We don't view science in these discussions, but that's actually where science belongs. And that's something that that this treaty that we were a part of creating and pushing for is actually implementing. I was last week working at the second meeting of states parties to the Treaty on the Prohibition of Nuclear Weapons. The first meeting happened last year in Vienna, and one of the things that this group, this meeting created was a scientific advisory group. It is a group composed of experts. These are physicists, medical doctors, biochemists, biologists. These are experts that are looking at the scientific evidence regarding nuclear weapons and then working with the politicians, with the member states, so that they can have a better understanding of the effects of nuclear weapons. And that better understanding is very helpful when it comes to universalizing the treaty. That means getting more member states and also promoting what we know about nuclear weapons, because what we are after when it comes to nuclear disarmament is a paradigm shift. It's changing the discourse, changing how people view nuclear weapons, not as an instrument of security and stability, but looking at those very abstract concepts in the light of the evidence, in the light of, okay, this is the numbers, this is what science tells us, right? So if we're able to look at that more objectively, then we're able to make decisions that are actually based on logic and not based on ideology. So the role of science is incredibly important in politics in that sense.
That's true, yes. More question.
So my question for you would be that what role do scientists have in promoting peace in areas that are affected by conflict?
Wow. Okay, so that is it. Well, that is a little bit more obvious when it comes to medical doctors, for instance, because we are caring for the wounded, we're caring for the injured, we're caring for the people who have all these disabilities that are a product of conflict. It is a little bit less obvious when it comes to other types of sciences. But when we talk about weapons of mass destruction, and weapons of mass destruction are called that way because they don't discriminate between military and civilian targets. They just destroy everything. So when it comes to the weapons of mass destruction and using those in conflict areas, the work of scientists is incredibly important, because then we can see why it is unacceptable. We can see why it is incompatible with international law, especially international humanitarian law. So the role of scientists specifically on the effects of how these weapons work and the effects of people in this sense is incredibly, it's essential to all the communication efforts, and it's essential to the shaping of the legal system that in the end will determine whether or not some weapons will be used in a conflict or not. For instance, now we don't have any countries saying that they are chemical weapons powers, or that they use biological weapons in their security doctrines like we do with nuclear weapons. That is because of a science-based approach that has made these weapons, that has created a powerful norm, and that has made these weapons unacceptable in the international light. So it is very important to have that understanding, and for scientists to translate that understanding and present it to the world.
The importance of communicate to the society.
Exactly.
If not, yes.
Scientific diplomacy, scientific communication. I mean, it's not just gathering the data that is important. Also, your role as well to communicate that data is extremely important as well.
Transmit, the message, the real one.
Exactly.
Okay, super interesting.
Yes.
So,
actually, you just mentioned science diplomacy.
Yes.
And the question I have in mind is, can science diplomacy be an effective tool for building peace? And if so, how?
Yeah.
Okay, yes, it definitely can.
Yes.
It definitely must. Because when we're talking about peace, we are not talking about peace is not the absence of conflict. Peace is the non-violent resolution of conflict. Peace is peoples getting along, and that this actually requires more resources, more brain power than a war, right? And it requires arduous diplomacy. It requires bridge building, for finding opportunities for cooperation. When my organization, IPPNW, was founded, it was founded by these high-level cardiologists. And they were, in 1980, the United States and the Soviet Union, there was no cultural bridges, absolutely. No communication at all, except for scientific conferences. So these doctors knew each other, and they met physically in person because they were scientists. And they said, okay, if we are able to meet in scientific conferences to talk about the heart, to talk about science, why can't we also meet to talk about other things that are actually even, more important, the actual application of this science into the world? So in that sense, like, they already had a very powerful voice. They already had the legitimacy, and also producing and gathering and presenting the authoritative information is a very, very powerful message. And that is actually what changed many things. It almost led to nuclear disarmament in 1991. Almost. We almost got there. Now we really need another push.
Science can be the tool
Yes.
in order to make peace in the planet. So.
Yes, because when we talk about science, we're not talking about nationalism, ideologies. We're talking about the objective truth, something that we can all agree on, something that we can all unite on. And that is actually, that's what we need. We need a common agreement, and that agreement, it's a powerful message to actually agree on the objective evidence.
So my question is, how do you see the intersection of human rights and medical profession in the context of global peace of efforts?
Well, it's a very strong intersection. It's almost the same thing in the sense, especially talking about medical efforts, because medical doctors, yes, we provide the science, the scientific evidence, but it's also the people who have to look after the people. Like the idea behind the science is to look after people, and all of this has to be in line with human rights. All of this is to look for and promote human rights. So the idea behind the peace movement is for us to have a better life as humans, right? I mean, it makes absolute sense in a very practical way. Like, it's absolute practicality if you think about it. Peace is the most efficient way that we can actually get along, and that we can actually thrive as human beings, that we can actually ensure our future, that we can actually rise to our individual and collective potential. That we require peace for that. So when it comes to like, peace should be central in that sense. When to medical practice, there is a famous quote by a famous physician called Dr. Virchow. He said, back in the 1900s, he said that medicine is a social science. Medicine is a social science, because we are, like, our patient is not just the individual patient, but also the context, also the community. So yes, definitely, there is a strong intersection there. For sure.
And as you said before, always in the middle, people, the person,
Yes.
human being.
Yes.
Okay, because sometimes the technology is important, but at the end, if you are a pediatrician, as is your case, so you have to focus on the people, the person who need help. So yeah.
We cannot lose focus of that. That people have to be at the center of the debate, pretty much of all debates, and that's even what business or whatever people, like if public policy has to do what it's supposed to do, serve the people.
Yeah.
And so you've mentioned that science is about taking into account the objective truth. And so relating back to the topic of nuclear disarmament, in your opinion and based on your experience, what are the biggest obstacles to creating a culture of peace through scientific engagement? And also, how do you think these areas and these issues can be addressed?
That's a whole presentation. It's such a good question that it requires like a huge presentation. So I have a presentation based just on that.
Maybe I should see that.
No, but it's a very that is the center of the problem. Like, why is there resistance to following the truth? The problem is with nuclear weapons is that nuclear weapons became the currency of power. So right now, like the dominant discourse is, that nuclear weapon states, in Spanish, we call them potencia nuclear, the nuclear potency. There is a lot of privilege associated to the adjective nuclear. And for instance, when the Cold War ended, that was a period of very low tension. That would have been the moment to get rid of nuclear weapons. Why didn't it happen? Because nuclear weapons are the currency of power. So, and that, there's a discourse, there's an ideology behind this. There's been decades of propaganda, of information, to the point that even the survivors of the nuclear attacks in Hiroshima and Nagasaki, they were censored regarding what information they could produce. Not only their pictures, their medical records, but also their letters, their poems. That was censored. The world did not know about the effects of radiation until much later because of that censorship. And in the meantime, there's, of course, a lot of propaganda regarding the greatness of nuclear weapons. The great, like how equating nuclear with advancement, with power, with superlative, everything nuclear is great. Right, and that's also kind of how we got to the point of having nuclear energy and equating nuclear energy with something great. Like if you think who are the smartest people in the world? Nuclear physicists, right? That's part of the discourse. So there's a whole bunch of other little things that we are being fed
daily,
subconsciously, daily. There's a lot of money invested in nuclear weapons. And that money doesn't also, we're talking about $83 billion a year of public money, like direct investment by governments, it's $83 billion. And indirectly, it's $116 billion, $116 billion in these companies. And that money is not just for the maintenance and modernization of the weapons, but it's also to feed into the think tanks, into the propaganda, into feeding academics, actually, and to do lobbies and to produce these messages that are getting there. So that is the biggest obstacle, because it is a big monster with many tentacles all over the place. So the big obstacle is that, and the interests of the hegemony of the people in power who don't want this message to get out there. So we kind of have to. That is what we have to do to get out there, to get to the media, to get people to understand what nuclear weapons actually are, to see the real face of nuclear weapons, so that we can change the discourse, and then the people in power will have to obey the political will of the people. And that is what the TPNW, the Treaty on the Prohibition of Nuclear Weapons, is actually doing.
Okay. So you and your organization has a lot of job to do. So a very, but the responsibility, I think, that all we have. So
exactly.
We can support you, and we can develop this message that we are learning today.
Yes, exactly. I will say that nuclear disarmament is not easy, certainly.
It's not.
But it is possible, and it is the route that we all have to set it's a goal that we all have to set. That's a road we all have to go to. And we all, everybody, every single person has a role to play here. And I will say that promoting adhesion to the treaty on the prohibition, Because it produces, it's a stigmatization thing, right? It's stigmatization. It means that it goes from being something good to being something bad. It really works whether or not the country signed the treaty. Like we saw it, for instance, with the United States and the landmines and cluster munitions. The United States never signed the treaties that forbid them, but they stopped producing them. Why? Because they lost their investors, they lost their buyers, and because there was a global climate of moral condemnation that made producing them a bad thing, bad for business,
So
right?
reputation.
Huh?
Image, reputation is
Yeah,
not good.
exactly.
Yeah.
So that's the process that whereby the treaty is already working. Like there's several pension funds, for instance, that have taken their investments from nuclear weapons, and also communicate the risks and how nuclear weapons are wrong, not only in our social media, but also make it a topic of conversation and change the discourse. Everybody can do that. That's something everybody can do.
Okay, we have 1 more minute for the last question. I don't know if someone... No? Okay, I'm going to show you one thing because Carlos has a surprise for you for today. So have you seen the medal of the Nobel Prize? So look at this.
Oh, that
Look at this. It's a real one.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's a beautiful medal, actually. This is every Nobel Prize has a different medal, and this one, like the other 4 prizes, are given in Sweden. This one is in Norway, and this one was designed by a famous Norwegian sculptor called Vigeland. So it's a little bit more artistic, I would say. And it's quite nice. So this is like in the front, it's the face of Alfred Nobel, and in the back, which is something that nobody ever gets to see, it's this. It says "For the peace and fraternity of humanity." So it's a little, it's quite very nice.
So thank you, Carlos. Thank you for your talk. That it has been amazing. Thank you for your explanation, and thank you for sharing this important message. So to prevent peace, and thank you for all your questions that have been amazing too. So thank you.
Thank you for having me. It's been
And we
it's a
will
true
make sure
pleasure.
to spread your message.
Yes,
That's what we need.
Yes, please.
Everybody be a part of this.
Of course, it's super important because a world without peace, nothing. Yeah. No jobs, no business, no family, no nothing. So,
Exactly. And peace, even at the smallest level, because what we need to do is reject violence. So even when you're driving and somebody cuts in, no, please.
relax, please. Okay. Perfect. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah.